What is going on, everybody? What is going on, the Catch fam? My name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we are finishing out our series of our top wide receivers heading into the 2022 fantasy football season. Today is our third video in this series. Parts 1 and Part 2, wide receivers 1 through 24 will be linked in the description down below. Today, we are going through wide receivers 25 through 45. This will be my complete list of early wide receiver rankings heading into the 2022 fantasy football season. If you do enjoy today's content, be sure to hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Come join the Catch family on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And of course, drop any comments, questions, concerns pertaining to the 2022 fantasy football season down below. All right, number one on today's list, number 25 overall, I've got DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. And listen, guys, DJ Moore is probably my favorite wide receiver heading into 2022 who did not make my top 24 rankings, and he could easily finish in the top 20. Came in as wide receiver number 18 in full PPR and standard scoring formats last season. Had 163 targets overall, 93 receptions, just over 1,100 receiving yards, and 4 total scores. Listen, guys, I love me some DJ Moore. I think he's an excellent wide receiver overall, but I am concerned about the quarterback play for the Carolina Panthers, and I am concerned for that offense as a whole. I'm also concerned in terms of DJ Moore's statistics. He has never scored more than 4 touchdowns in a single season. So there's a couple reasons why I'm a little hesitant to go out and target him, but his current ADP is phenomenal, coming in at 46.8 through the Sleeper app. And don't get me wrong, guys, there are plenty of receivers in my top 24, especially the 13 through 24 area, who had shaky quarterback play and or poor offenses. So I still think that he's in line to have a good season, but there are some concerns for me with DJ Moore. But nonetheless, he is a number 1 receiver on a respective football team, and he should be able to garner plenty of targets going into 2022. I've got him right outside the top 24 at 25 overall. All right, number 26, I do want to touch quickly on Jerry Jeudy. Listen, guys, I get it. You're either a Jeudy fan or you're a Sutton fan at this point in the offseason. He only played 10 games last season. Overall, 56 targets, 38 receptions, 467 receiving yards, and 0 scores. We look at his rookie season, played in 16 games, 113 targets, 52 receptions overall, 856 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. Listen, guys, I was a huge fan of Jeudy going into the 2021 fantasy football season, but he simply did not impress me last season after that return from injury. Don't get me wrong, I do think he could make a huge leap forward with Russell Wilson at the quarterback position, but simply put, at this point in the offseason, I am Team Sutton, and I am a little bit more bullish on Courtland Sutton. I've seen a lot of debate about this in the fantasy community, and only time will tell. I do believe that Jeudy will have an opportunity to really be that nice PPR security blanket type receiver for Russell Wilson, but at the moment, I just feel better about Courtland Sutton. Let me know in the comments down below, guys. Which team are you, Team Jeudy or Team Sutton? For me, I've got Jeudy right outside the top 25 at number 26 headed into the 2022 fantasy football season. All right, number 27 overall, we've got Chris Godwin, who could easily end up being a receiver that you can target and turn into a bargain play for your 2022 fantasy football roster. Still recovering from an ACL tear, so that is a reason why Godwin is so far back on our overall rankings and most rankings out there. Last season, with only playing 14 games, came in as wide receiver 16 in PPR, number 19 in standard, 128 targets overall, 98 receptions, and 1,100 receiving yards, 5 total scores. Now listen, guys, those are very, very good numbers for 14 total games played. And if we get news that Chris Godwin is going to be ready by week 1 or week 2, he could easily move up in most rankings in ADP by 10 to 12 spots, if not more, especially if we get the news that he is good to go by week 1. But at this point in the offseason, we simply do not know. Could be week 6, week 4, week 8, week 1, who knows? So for that reasoning alone, he comes in at number 27 for me. But do not forget what offense he is a part of. Do not forget what quarterback is throwing Godwin the rock this season. Like I said, if you can strategically go out and make him your wide receiver 3 in fantasy drafts, you could come out with a complete bargain in Chris Godwin. But at the moment for me, I've got him at number 27 overall. All right, number 28 on the list overall, we've got Elijah Moore of the New York Jets. Last season came in as wide receiver 49 in PPR scoring formats, number 45 in standard scoring formats. Only played in 11 games. Overall had 77 targets, 43 receptions, 538 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. I was a lot higher on Moore earlier in the offseason, but at the moment, that wide receiver room for the New York Jets has become just a little bit crowded, especially since the NFL draft. So he comes back just a little bit on the overall list for me. I do think he will be the primary target for Zach Wilson and company. So I like Moore quite a bit, but at the moment I'm just a little bit shaky overall with how that receiving room is going to work out. So I'll put him at number 28 overall, but I do think he is a bargain where you can go out and target him in fantasy football drafts. We've seen him fall pretty far back overall in our subscriber mock draft. So keep an eye on him. I do think he could be a huge bargain going into the 2022 season. All right, number 29 on the list, we've got Michael Thomas, who could easily finish so far ahead of where he is being placed in rankings heading into 2022. But guys, let's not get it twisted. We haven't seen him play more than 7 games since 2020. He's had some locker room issues, off the field issues, things like that, kind of making his status with the Saints a little bit shaky the last 2 seasons or so. And then, of course, plenty of injury issues as well. But let's not get it twisted. From 2016 through 2019, this was one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL. This is someone who fantasy managers were drafting in the first round on a consistent basis. If he is able to come back healthy with Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry, as well as Kamara coming out of the backfield to help take defensive pressure off of him, Jameis Winston throwing him the rock, I could really see Michael Thomas being a candidate for comeback player of the year. Just keep an eye on Michael Thomas, similar to a Chris Godwin. I think this is a receiver you could go out and target as your wide receiver 3 or even your wide receiver 1 if you want to go running back heavy, tight end early, QB early, whatever it may be. This is someone you can take a risk on who could really pay off, but I could also see this being similar to last season where a lot of fantasy managers thought the same thing and kind of reached for Thomas in some later rounds and just ended up not getting any value whatsoever last season. So for me at the moment, I've got him number 29 overall heading into the 2022 fantasy football season. All right, number 30 overall, I've got Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings. I think Thielen is an absolute steal where we've seen him going in most mock drafts as of late. He was on absolute fire last season through 13 games, 95 targets, 67 receptions, 726 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns in just 13 games. I mean, you look at that first half of the season, weeks 1 through week 12, he only had 5 games where he had less than double-digit fantasy points. He was just on absolute fire, and he was Kirk Cousins' best friend, especially in the red zone. So I still feel very good about Adam Thielen even coming back from injury. Like I said, I think he's a bargain receiver like a lot of the receivers that we were talking about on today's list. So I like Thielen. Keep an eye on him, and like I said, keep him as one of those receivers that you can target in your mid drafts. You could really pay off in high fashion heading into 2022. Okay, number 31, we've got DeAndre Hopkins, who was obviously serving that 6-game suspension to start the season. If he was not serving that suspension, he would easily be in the top 15, top 20 in these rankings overall, but that 6-game suspension pushes him back quite a bit. We all know the talent of DeAndre Hopkins, arguably one of the best receivers in the entire league and part of an extremely dynamic offense. Through 10 games last season, came out as wide receiver number 45 in PPR, number 39 in standard, 64 targets, 42 receptions, 572 receiver yards, and 8 scores. There's not much to say here. Once again, similar to a Chris Godwin or an Adam Thielen, this is a receiver who you can target in those mid rounds, make your wide receiver 3, and it could really help your fantasy team down the stretch. Don't get me wrong, guys, it's going to hurt to miss him those first 6 weeks, but those most important games of the fantasy season come mid-season and after. In the playoffs for fantasy football come in the second half of the season. So Hopkins could really be a bargain in 2022 fantasy football drafts, but that current suspension brings him in at number 31 overall on my rankings. All right, number 32 overall, we've got our first rookie receiver on the list. We've got Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons. Simply put, he's obviously going to be the number 2 option next to Kyle Pitts within that offense, but he is the number 1 receiver for the Falcons. I don't feel great about the potential quarterback play out of Marcus Mariota. I don't feel great about that offense either, but at the end of the day, they obviously spent a ton of draft capital on him, and they are going to be feeding him the rock all season long. So I'll easily put him in as 32. And once again, he is a receiver you could offer a ton of value, and a rookie receiver 100% taking a risk on moving into 2022. Number 33, I've got Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, a change of scenery for Cooper throughout this offseason. Listen, I have Cooper a little bit further back than a lot of rankings out there, but I am simply worried about the situation with Deshaun Watson and who is going to be throwing Amari Cooper the football. And on top of that, I don't necessarily believe in Cooper 100% as a true wide receiver. One, he's a declining veteran. He has had injury issues and boomer bust potential his entire career. I would feel a lot more better, all things aside, if Deshaun Watson was the starting quarterback going into 2022. I would like Cooper's fantasy outlook a lot more, but at the end of the day, I just don't feel great about Cooper, so I've got him at number 33 overall. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys think I'm too low on Amari Cooper, if you guys feel like he is worth targeting. At the moment, for me, I just don't feel that way, but we do have to recognize that he is going to be the number one target within that offense, whether it's Jacoby Brissett or Deshaun Watson throwing him the football the majority of the season. Number 34, I've got Rashad Bateman going into his sophomore season. Showed a lot of promise in his rookie season overall, and he steps into the role of being the primary target, or at least a primary wide receiver on the Baltimore Ravens next to Mark Andrews at the tight end position. I do think that Bateman is capable of being a wide receiver one, but at the same time, this is a run first offense, and I just don't know, man. I think Bateman could really pay off at his current value and his current ADP, but I'm just a little bit hesitant because I don't necessarily think that this is going to be a pass first offense. I hope that he proves us wrong, but for now, he comes in at number 34 heading into the 2022 fantasy football season. All right, number 35 on today's list, we've got our second rookie receiver in Treylon Burks. Listen, guys, I think he is the perfect comp to AJ Brown, and obviously the Titans went out and drafted him to completely replace AJ Brown. So I do think that he could easily be a rookie receiver who garners a ton of targets within that offense. Obviously, we've heard a lot of negative buzz about Treylon Burks since the NFL draft in terms of conditioning, asthma stories, all that stuff. I kind of compare this to some of the Jamar Chase stories that we heard last season. So Burks' ADP overall has fallen back a little bit since the NFL draft. I think he could end up being quite the bargain in fantasy drafts going into 2022. I'm not reading too much into the issues with conditioning or asthma or anything like that. He is a playmaker. He's a playmaker in college. He's a very unique, big body type receiver. I think he's going to fit in perfectly within that offense. So I'll put him number 35 overall, and I think he's going to have some nice boomer bust potential in the 2022 fantasy football season. All right, number 36 overall, I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions, who's a receiver that I absolutely loved earlier in the offseason, but with the addition of Jameson Williams to that offense since the NFL draft, as well as DJ Chark, it has just become a completely crowded, not only offense, but receiver room as well. I mean, you've got DeAndre Swift coming out of the backfield, who offers a lot of pass catching potential. You've got Khalif Raymond and Quentin Cephas, who actually had some pretty good games last season. Then, like I said, you add DJ Chark, Jameson Williams in the draft, and don't forget about Josh Reynolds, Jared Goff's old buddy from the Rams, who's a very good slot receiver as well. Then you got TJ Hawkinson at the tight end position. It's a phenomenal tight end. Nonetheless, Amon-Ra St. Brown came in as wide receiver 21 last season in PPR scoring formats and wide receiver 23 in standard scoring formats. Overall, 119 targets, 90 receptions, 912 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. I still like him as a nice boomer bust type receiver to add as a flex player, and his current ADP is phenomenal overall. So I think he's a wide receiver worth targeting, and I still like him quite a bit, but he moves a little bit further back than where I had him earlier in the offseason just because of how crowded a wide receiver room it is for Lions, as well as an offense overall. Number 37, I've got Juju Smith-Schuster, the first Kansas City Chiefs player to make the rankings for the wide receiver position. And listen, simply put, I think that Juju is going to have the best opportunity out of the wide receiver acquisitions for the Chiefs to become a true number one wide receiver for Patrick Mahomes and company. And that's really all I got to say here. They've made some good acquisitions. Sky Moore, obviously, MBS. You've still got McCole Hardman. And don't get me wrong, Travis Kelce is going to be the number one option. But at the wide receiver position, I currently like Juju the most to have the most potential out of that offense. So I'll happily put him at number 37 heading into 2022. Number 38 overall, I've got Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks. Listen, guys, I know this is a little bit disrespectful with how completely talented Tyler Lockett is as a wide receiver, but a lot of people in the fantasy community aren't very bullish on Tyler Lockett. And at the end of the day, for me, I just don't think that chemistry that shined with that amazing deep ball from Russell Wilson to Tyler Lockett is going to come through with Drew Lock at the quarterback position. If by any chance Tyler Lockett gets traded to another team, maybe the Packers, someone who could throw a deep ball or whoever it may be, Tyler Lockett will move up quite a bit, but at the moment, while he's on the Seattle Seahawks, I just don't feel good about his fantasy outlook. But at the same time, came in as wide receiver 15 in PPR last season, number 10 overall in standard. At the end of the day, had 107 targets, 73 receptions, just over 1,100 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. There just comes a point in your drafts where you're just not going to be able to pass up the talent that Tyler Lockett is and the value that he's shown over the past couple of years in fantasy football. So I do think he's worth taking a chance on at the right price, but I just don't see Drew Lock and company being the same as Russell Wilson and company. We'll find out in 2022. Number 39 overall, I've got Chris Olave, one of my favorite rookie receivers. I got him a little bit higher than a lot of rankings out there. I just think that he's in line to have a very good season overall. I just simply like Chris Olave as a prospect, and I think he's in a good position with Michael Thomas playing as a wide receiver 1. Then more than likely you've got Jarvis in the slot as well. I think Olave is just going to be able to be open on a lot of plays and make a lot out of those opportunities. And I just like Olave a lot as a prospect, so I'm just going to put him number 39. He is a rookie receiver that I just have a crush on moving into the 2022 fantasy football season. Okay, number 40, I've got Gabe Davis, who some fantasy managers and members of the fantasy community have a little bit higher on their rankings, but I like him right at number 40, going to step in and be able to play as that wide receiver 2 for the Buffalo Bills next to Stephon Diggs, and maybe you could argue Dawson Knox, but overall is going to be your number 2, number 3 target on this team. If you're bullish on the Bills offense, like 99.9% of people are, then you should like Gabriel Davis. It's that simply put. Last season came in as wide receiver 57 overall, but there was a lot of other receivers being filtered in that offense. At the end of the day, 63 targets, 35 receptions, 549 receivers, and 6 touchdowns. I mean, off of 35 total receptions, those are very good numbers. So I do think that there's plenty of reason to feel good about Gabriel Davis, and where you can currently go out and draft him overall, he has a great ADP, and I do think he's worth selecting. I like him right as number 40 overall heading into 2022. Number 41, we've got Brandon Ayuk, who, regardless if Deebo Samuel stays a 49er or does not stay a 49er, I like him right at this spot. I think if he becomes a true number 1 wide receiver, if Deebo holds out, then he's going to be able to make a lot out of those opportunities. And if he does not, I still like him as a wide receiver 2. He had a disappointing season last year in comparison to his rookie season, but obviously Deebo took away a lot of that shine. I do think Brandon Ayuk is absolutely worth taking a shot on at the right price, and I just like him right in this position in the top 45, closer to the 40 overall mark. We'll have to kind of monitor that situation with that receiving room, specifically Deebo Samuel, to see if Brandon Ayuk moves a little bit further up on this list as the season starts to draw closer. Number 42, I've got Christian Kirk, which I think you could argue Christian Kirk should be a little bit higher on this list overall. It is a relatively crowded offense as a whole. You've still got Etienne and Robinson coming out of the backfield. Got Christian Kirk, Jamal Agnew, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, Zay Jones as well, Laquan Treadwell, and Evan Ingram. It's just kind of a weird offense. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. We don't exactly know who Trevor Lawrence is going to like to target the most. We don't know what Peterson's going to do as a head coach. There's a lot of question marks here, but what we do know is that Christian Kirk got an enormous bag from the Jaguars to play as a Jacksonville Jaguar in the offseason. I think they're going to feed him the football for that specific reason. They paid him. They're going to want him to be a big part of this offense. And I love Christian Kirk as a receiver. I don't necessarily think he got signed at his value, but more power to him. At the end of the day, I do think he's always been a productive receiver and someone worth targeting in fantasy. If we look at his stats last year, number 26 overall in PPR, number 28 in standard scoring format, 103 targets, 77 receptions, 982 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. I think that he could easily replicate those numbers within Jacksonville's offense, and I think he's a bargain receiver to go out and target. He is someone who I really like, where you can grab him at his current ADP, but I still like him right at number 42 as he's got a lot of question marks. And maybe Christian Kirk doesn't have those question marks. Maybe it's more the Jaguars and their offense and what Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson are going to do. At the end of the day, I'll comfortably leave him at 42, and maybe that'll allow me to be able to draft him in more 2022 fantasy football drafts. Number 43, I've got my guy Bobby Trees with a change of scenery headed to the Tennessee Titans. I think that Robert Woods could be an excellent slot type receiver, PPR type receiver, a nice security blanket for Ryan Tannehill. And I think he'll actually allow Treylon Burks to really come in as a rookie receiver and play well also. But I think that Robert Woods, as long as he's healthy, is going to garner a ton of targets within that Tennessee Titans offense. So I think he's being slept on a little bit. If he didn't get hurt last season, I think he would be absolutely in a different overall ADP heading into 2022. And don't forget, he was playing very, very well within the Rams offense last season before he did get injured. So I think he's another receiver to go out and target and could really come out with some nice statistics in 2022. Number 44, I've got Allen Lazard, who I think has the best shot to play as a primary wide receiver 1 for the Packers. I would still say Christian Watson's probably within my top 50 overall. But listen, I like Allen Lazard because he already has some of that chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. We've already seen him within this offense. So I'll give the nod to Allen Lazard. It's very unfortunate that we don't have a Green Bay Packers wide receiver a lot higher up on this list overall. But at the moment, we just don't know exactly what to expect out of Aaron Rodgers and that offense from the receiving position. So I'll put Lazard as number 44 heading into 2022. All right, last on the list overall for our early 2022 fantasy football rankings at the wide receiver position, we've got my guy, Russell Gage, who I think is going to be an absolute steal in value heading into 2022. I really, really think he's going to have a nice year. I think he's going to fit right into that role that we saw Antonio Brown play when he was healthy and or at least playing for the Buccaneers the last 2 years. But on top of that, we know that Chris Godwin is going to miss some time like we talked about earlier in today's video. And I think that those first couple of weeks when Chris Godwin is more than likely not playing, Russell Gage is going to be able to step up and really make an impact for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Plus, the entire offseason, Tom Brady has been raving about Russell Gage, which makes me like him even more than I already did. He is someone who really helped out my fantasy team last year when I was hurting at the receiver position late in the season. He really, really came on for the Falcons, played as their primary wide receiver 1, essentially weeks 9 through week 18. Overall finished with 94 targets, 66 receptions, 770 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. I think within this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, he could easily beat all of those numbers. Don't get me wrong, I still think at the end of the season, he will be the third option for Tom Brady once obviously Chris Godwin comes back in. Mike Evans has already been playing throughout the season, but I really like his current value where you can go out and draft him. And I think he's going to have a nice season overall. So I think he's a great fit as the last receiver on our early wide receiver rankings at number 45 heading into the 2022 fantasy football season. And that'll do it for our early 2022 fantasy football wide receiver rankings. Like I said, parts 1 and part 2 will be linked in the description down below if you guys want to go check those out, see who we've got numbers 1 through 12 and then numbers 13 through 24 overall. And we will be doing the same series for the quarterback, tight end, and running back position heading into the 2022 fantasy football season. It has been an absolute blast starting to get these rankings put together. If you did enjoy today's content, be sure to hit that like button down below. If you're new to the channel, it really does help us out if you guys do subscribe. Come join the Catch fam on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and make sure to join our Discord down below as well so you guys can hop into some of our future subscriber mock drafts. We would love to have you guys there. And be sure to drop a comment. Let me know what you guys thought of these rankings overall as we finish out the wide receiver position for our early 2022 fantasy football rankings. With that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening, and remember, you saw it here on The Catch.